Okay. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists. Today we're going to be looking at this painting by Jasper Johns. And Jasper Johns did many different versions of this painting, the American flag. In fact, exactly 1 year ago, we did a different version of this painting. This one right there. And that one you can certainly find in the playlist down below if you want to watch this one and recreate that one. So we've done a version of this, and we're going to do it maybe a little bit differently. Today we're going to try using some stencils and to really try to build up some texture with some heavy matte gel. So we're going to talk about all those different steps. We'll walk you through the whole process today. So the way that we're going to do this, and if you're watching this, after it aired, you can use the time-stamped chapters to jump ahead to the places you like. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to get the painting transferred onto the canvas. Then, usually I stain it, but I think since we're going to be building up so much texture, I don't know if we're really going to see it. Well, I'll think about it. Then we'll talk a little bit about the history of this particular painting and John's biography. We did talk about it last year, so I'm not sure how much we need to go into detail. But then I'm not sure exactly the process here. I don't know if we're going to be doing so much of these foreground backgrounds, but I would anticipate in a couple of hours we should do our side-by-side comparison here. So if you're watching for the very, very first time, consider liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell so you know when new videos are coming. This is not my usual time or day to do these videos, so it's a good idea to do that so you can know when these bonus episodes are happening. And if you learn something and you want to support the channel with a small donation as little as $1, you can use the PayPal, the YouTube Super Chat. You can contact me through my email or the Facebook group. All those links are down below. Okay, so our first step is to get this image onto the canvas. And there is a free template of this flag that is available in our Dropbox folder. I'll show you where that is here in a second. There is a private Facebook group, which I encourage you to join. There's a link in the description, and there's an awesome community of people from all over the world. That's one of the most exciting things in the world. And I also do a little write-up for every episode as well. So join that. And then once a month, I also go through all of the work that's on there and give people feedback on how to improve their work. To get this template, there's a Dropbox link down below. And you'll see at the very top, there's our most simple paintings. These are our simple paintings based on the work of other great artists. And this is just kind of crazy coincidence, but last year's episode was in Dropbox folder 35. Today's episode is in Dropbox folder 135. All right, so here's the slightly different flag, and you'll see there's the original image and then two versions of this outline as a JPEG or a PDF. And once you print that off, you can transfer it in the exact way that I'm just about to do now. So I've got a few different materials that I'm going to experiment with here. We'll talk about that in a moment, because I'm going to do a little bit of transfer onto those materials. But to get started, I'm going to put this flag on here. Now, I was thinking I would jam it up into the corner. I think I'm going to move it. I kind of want about as much space around the edge up here and here, but I want to be mindful I don't make this bottom stripe too wide. I think that's pretty good. And it looks pretty straight as well. So it looks like that stripe on the bottom might be just a little bit wide. Okay. So, you know, probably with painting like this, the most time-consuming thing is just going to be doing some of this outlining and then the cutting of the template. So, it wouldn't surprise me if a few people tuned out and then tuned back in 30 minutes from now to see how things turned out and where we're at that stage. I usually try to get all this done before the episodes begin, but today's a holiday, so this is what I do on my holidays. I make art. So, and actually, you know what? I was going to, yeah, you know what? I was thinking about not doing these stars and just doing them on the template, but it doesn't take that long, and I'm hoping that this will also help me to align my stencil. So bear with me here. So last year when I did this, I didn't use a stencil, and I just sort of blobbed paint on to make the texture of the stars. Kind of just painted, and I did it pretty quickly. I think it was because it was also a holiday, and I was like, let's just have some fun. And so this time I might be a little bit more patient with putting this together, because I've done one that was maybe a little bit sloppier and a little bit more expressive, and this one will be a little bit more controlled, precise, whichever adjective you want to use. We'll talk about this flag because it is slightly different than the flag that I painted the previous time. Oops. But it is not the flag that currently flies in the United States. If you count the stars, count the stars. How many stars do you see there? Okay, just want to double check. Ah, you see, I missed a little line there. Okay. So there's that. I mean, maybe maybe I will put the Imprimatura on there. Well, let me just think. I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get my stencils ready. Bearbait says prep is always the most time consuming. I wish art gurus would be honest regarding this point. Great point. Yes. Yeah, that's always the thing that takes the longest, getting everything ready. And then once you get everything ready, it's just sort of like those cooking shows that make it look like you can make a huge 3-course meal in 15 minutes, and then you realize everything's nicely chopped up and they're just putting things into and stirring it. You're like, well, but that would have taken hours to prep. So it's not really a 15-minute thing. It's a 15-minute of actually cooking, but yeah, not 15 minutes. Okay, so let's actually, I just want to show you a few of the materials that I want to experiment with for a stencil. So here's the first thing. I went looking for a stencil that had stars like this, and I couldn't find it at a local dollar store or art supply store, toy store. So I'm like, okay, well, let's try to make our own, because probably most people are in that same position, and you can use these same sort of techniques for making anything, not just, you know, the Star Spangled Banner. So here is like a foam that I got at a dollar store, and it's you know, made for kids to cut out little shapes, and they can chew on them, and it's got a really nice fun texture. It feels like a little bit of, you know, like the mat that I'm standing on right now to help cushion my knees. Here's a piece of cardboard, and I wanted to find a fairly thin, rigid cardboard. This one, you can see it's corrugated, so it's got that wavy shape inside. But you could see how kind of wide the waves are, right? Here's another piece of cardboard from like a box salad spinner we got, and you might be able to. It's much denser weave here. I don't know if that even shows up on camera. Let me see if I can. Okay, so you see here's the first one, and then here's the second one. See how much denser that weave is? So I want to see if this this one here will do a little bit better job of the stencil. And then last but not least, I have this piece. This is actually from a watercolor pad, and I saved the back side of it for this type of purpose. So this is like a compressed cardboard that where all the fibers are just kind of, so it's just very, very thick. There's no corrugation in it. We don't have that wavy shape glued between two separate things. So I'm going to try doing a few stars with each of these methods so that you can kind of just see for yourself whichever one you might want to use. I'll just say right off the top, my suspicion is that this material is going to be the best. In fact, let me see. I also have like poster board, and I've actually used this poster board for spray paint stencils. So let's do one with this as well. Of course, we can use tape, and maybe I'll use some tape as well. So there's lots of different options here, and in fact, how many rows do we have here? What would be should we try to do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We could do one with tape, one with this. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so 6 different materials. Perfect. It's almost like as if I planned it, right? Okay, so we'll do 6 rows of stars. So I'm going to trace these shapes out onto here. So let's take Now, this is going to be kind of tricky for me to cut out. That's the one thing that immediately springs to mind is like, how are you going to cut it out of this cardboard? So I'm just going to try to put this right just closer to the center. This one we will see. I'm thinking if I was to rank them, maybe I should I'll say that this is going to come in 6th place. I think this is going to be my worst template. Let's go to this one next. I was going to try to do this right in there to save space, but you know what? Okay. I suspect this one's going to go okay, but I still think it's going to be not as effective. Okay. So what do you think? How about I'll label these? I'll give you... We'll start with... What do we got? A, B, C, D, E, F, right? A, B, C, D, E, F. So well, this is F. This is E. And so I'm saying I think this is going to come in 6th place. What do you think? I'm not sure which... Okay, let's do this one next. I wonder if I'm going to be able to get this on here. I wonder if this image... Well, it's not transferring the image, but I do have... It's leaving sort of an impression. So it's barely there. It's already kind of fading away, so let's get the ones that are... Ah, it's almost gone. I can hardly see it. Ah! They seem to have gotten bigger as they went. Okay, so let's say this one... E, A, B, C, D. I don't know. I'm thinking this one's going to be 5. 4. We'll open this up to voting here shortly, and we'll see what you guys think. I'm going to use the shiny side, which I think is going to be just a little bit more resistant to water, or the water that's in the acrylic paint, so to keep its rigidity. Actually, as well, I'm just going to move this over. Think on that. And we got tape, and then this one here. Okay, let's do this up here. Wow, we got the whole crew back together. Everyone's watching. That's awesome. Which is even more incredible because we got people from all over the world, and Independence Day is only celebrated in the United States. I mean, I guess it's possible there's another Independence Day that happens to coincide with American Independence Day. That is, I've never thought about that. That's kind of an intriguing coincidence, I guess, unless there's, you know, a country that sort of sees itself in solidarity with American independence. I don't know that. I never thought of that. Okay. And then the last one here, we're going to put tape on. Should we just, let's do that now. Oops, not quite long enough. Let's put that right. Oops, sorry. So we'll probably do the tape one last, but oh, didn't even occur to me that these templates are going to overlap. Okay, well, let's think about that. There's a lot of things that that didn't occur to me until just now, but so maybe I should do this first. I'm okay, so let's do my ranking here of what I think is going to be best, and then you tell me. CD. Six, 5, 4. D, E. Let's say C. 3. Okay, so I'm just going to show you what I think is going to happen in terms of stencils. The ones I think are going to be most effective. I think tape is going to be most effective because I've used it many times for this specific purpose and I know it works. Little bit less sure with the heavy matte gel, if we really try to build up texture, how that would look. My next guess as to what would work well would be a fairly rigid, thick piece of cardboard that is not corrugated. I think that would work really well. Next place is my C, my piece of poster board from the dollar store. I think this would work pretty well. I think if we were using spray paint, these two would be our most effective. My fourth most anticipatedly effective one is this thinly corrugated board. I think it's going to work, but I think it's going to be a little bit tricky to cut this properly, and I think I might see a little bit of this sort of texture coming through. I think this is sort of my wild card. I think this is either going to work really well or really not at all. I think it could work really well. I think its advantage is just its flexibility, but I think that's also its weakness. And as I start cutting into here, is this whole thing just going to start falling apart, right? So that's going to be interesting to see how what happens there. And then lastly, the one that I think is going to be least effective is going to be the corrugated cardboard, your typical corrugated cardboard. Because first of all, I think this is going to be very difficult to cut. We're going to see some texture potentially occur here. And just because of its thickness, even just getting the paint down to the bottom of the canvas, I'm anticipating the corners of these stars not turning out very well. So if we go even further out, let's just see, you can do a little vote here yourself as to which ones you think are going to be most effective. Here, I'll put A, B, C, D, E, and F. Which one do you think is going to work best as a stencil for heavy matte gel? All right, if you're just want to stay there, wants to roll away. Okay, in fact, I am going to take a picture of this so that I remember, because I'm anticipating I'm going to forget what's what, and when I start gluing these down, it could get a little confusing. So if you're doing this kind of thing, keeping some sort of record as you go can be a bit of a relief. So okay, so what should we do first here? Should we save the one that I think is going to work best for last, or save that one for last? I think I might save this one for last because I can always peel this tape off. So I'm going to start in the middle. This is the one I thought would sort of work pretty well, but maybe not perfectly. That way I'm not starting with the worst one, and then I might learn things as I go, and then so it's not fair to the one that I think is going to work the least. This way, I'm trying to do this as most scientifically as possible. So this is going to take a little bit of time. In fact, what is the fastest way to cut out these stars? I've never done a star stencil before, so I'm trying to think if I cut these shapes. So this first one is working really well in terms of the cutting. The cutting here is really nice and straightforward because the paper itself is nice and thin. Alright, so I'm not having to really apply too much pressure to get down to the bottom layer. Okay, I gotta be careful I'm not taking off some of the areas in between. Like this one, you see how it's kind of independent here between those stars? I almost pulled that right off. Obviously, if you're doing any of this kind of stuff and you're using a knife, just want to be careful you don't hurt yourself, that you're watching what you're doing and you're going carefully. You know, you don't want to, there's no hurry, and you're using a knife. I don't think, in my opinion, there's any artwork that's worth trading a fingertip for. Okay, so that's pretty good. The one thing is, you could see, you know, this one tore through a little bit, and that makes it just a little bit less stable, right? So its thinness has some advantages. It also has some drawbacks. So that worked out really well. That was nice and quick, and you're like, wow, this is going to be fast. Well, we'll see. So how about this one here? This one is using this compressed cardboard. This is going to be much harder to cut through. I'm feeling like I might have to cut through it a number of times and even go a little bit longer. I don't even know if I'm all the way through. We'll see here shortly. I didn't even get through once. So that just, okay, there I'm through. There I'm through. So that just means this is going to, basically takes twice as long to do it, because I got to go through every line twice here. So this is also the kind of thing too that you could easily cut your fingers on, because when you start kind of doing these harder surfaces, you really have to dig in and pull. So you don't want to be pulling towards, you don't want to have your fingers on this side doing, that's, you'll easily just lop the tip of your finger right off. And what's gross is I've seen it happen. Obviously not to myself, but I've seen people do it. And, you know, it's one of those things you immediately regret not having said something when someone's doing it. And so I've had people say to me like, I don't, the way you're holding that knife, kind of a little sketchy. And at first it's kind of like you feel really embarrassed and angry, and then afterwards, you know what, I'm glad that that person said something, because I wasn't really thinking too clearly at that moment. Now of course you can use like a laser printer, or if you have something like that, like where I teach, the university I teach at, we have like a laser printer that can print into wood and things like that. But I don't have one here at home, and I don't suspect most people do either, right? So I'll just chip out some of these pieces as I go. So I think, you know, this could be really a very, very effective stencil once it's completed. As I'm cutting here, I'm like, please don't cut yourself on live stream here. Gosh, that would be. I'll be back later on after I've gotten a few stitches and they've put my amputated fingers back on. We'll see you guys this afternoon. Man. Ah. So a few of these pieces are very close together and are pulling apart a bit. Wow, look how many people are watching. That's crazy. I guess a lot of people got the day off. That's crazy. Come on. Ah, okay, that's not good. So what I just did is, because I'm trying to peel this off, I accidentally peeled off a bit of the space in between two stars. It's now thinner. Oh no. Okay, and then this piece just came out. We'll use scissors to fix that. But this is, I was fully anticipating something like this could happen. So that's one of the sort of possible disadvantages of something like this when it's really small. If we were doing this much larger, I think this would probably be our very best option. See, my main fear is that I'll have to really push the paint to get it into those corners. And how on earth does this go? So let's put a bit of tape here. Let's see, how can I fix this? Can I put that tape there? Oh, cool. I love seeing the debate there in the chat about which one's going to work best. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. I'm not going to bother taping this one down because I think, even though it's a little bit flimsy, I think it's going to hold up. So there's two. We got these two so far. And I might trim these down. I don't know how I'm going to get that on the canvas. Anyway, we'll come to those things. So this is the one that I anticipate being the worst. But now that I'm cutting it, it goes fairly simple. Going through fairly easily. I mean, as long as you got a sharp knife. Oops. Let's see, let's. Okay, so here's where I'm starting to kind of notice that popping these little star shapes out is going to be tricky. So this is going to be a bit of a pain. There's a few that I didn't quite get the corners, or I was trying to overcut it a bit so that those things would just easily pop out, but I guess not. Happened in some places, not in all places. So again, you know, if I was doing this much larger, I think this would be really effective. The one thing with this kind of cardboard is once it gets a little bit wet, it's going to become quite useless. So if you're doing the same kind of image over and over and over again, after about the fourth one, it's going to become a little bit, I just don't know how effective the results are going to be. Now, I think this right now looks better than the results are going. I'm going to bet you that when I start smushing some of my gel medium in here and then pull this off, I think I'm just going to get a little blob. I don't think I'm going to even see a star shape at all. That's why I think this one, for this purpose, is not going to be very effective. So let's try this with our much more finely corrugated cardboard. It cuts much easier because it's much thinner. Alright, so I have to put much less effort in. And because it's thinner, that also suggests that it's going to be easier to smush paint into sort of the little corners that form here. You know, you do something like this, and then I have to think to myself, wonder how many times my fingers have been on the other side of the razor blade, and people are just like, he just told us not to do that. What an idiot. And then I'll be watching us back later and go, oh yeah, do what I say, not what I do. Okay. So these triangles pop out much easier. Again, this perennial problem of these kind of corners, the areas between the stars. The space between the stars. That sounds like a what kind of movie does that sound like? The Space Between the Stars. I was gonna say it sounds like a romantic comedy, but then it sounds too esoteric to be a rom-com, doesn't it? Unless it was like about a astrophysicist who falls in love or something. You know, Renee Zellweger plays a astrophysicist who doesn't believe she'll ever get married and spends all her time in a observatory studying the stars. And then she falls in love with an unlikely person. Who would that unlikely person be? I wonder... yeah, it could be another astrophysicist. I feel like it has to be something even more outside her comfort zone for it to be really satisfying. Like, not a jock or the janitor, but like the guy at the coffee shop, or the waiter at the coffee shop, perhaps. Okay, so that's good. The one benefit of this is that this side here is also coated with a material that makes it a little bit more resistant to water. So that bodes well that, you know, if at least one side is not going to warp quite as quickly. So I think this might be moving up on my list here. Okay. And this is like cutting through butter. Oh, man. This, you know, I don't know. This could be really effective. I think that's why I said this is like the wild card. I think it's either going to work really well or not at all. So we'll see. That's sort of why I bought it, thinking, you never know. Okay. In this instance, I kind of have to hold this down to keep things from tearing and falling apart. Okay. So I don't know. I'm thinking this could work. The one, again, because it's a little bit flimsier, when I apply this gel medium here, it just, I'm afraid when I pull it up, it's just going to come up. Anyway, we'll see. So I think, is that all 5 of them? The last one is the tape itself. So the next thing I got to think about is if I do this, then the row below, how do I keep the row below from getting squashed? Should I do every second? I have a feeling this is not going to be the fairest way to do this. It would be easier if I just did a whole grid of each one of these. Well, I think it's entirely possible that some of these are not going to work at all, and it won't even matter. So I might end up having just to wipe stuff I do away. I think that's probably what could happen here. Okay, let's I'm gonna peel that off. Let's put a little bit of paint on here, even though I think I'm gonna cover it up entirely just because that's what I normally do, and let's just keep some routine down here. Okay, I see lots of comments in the chat, and I think suggestions on how to approach this, so I'm going to put this paint on, and then I'll take a look at some of your chat. Wow, lots of options here. Oops. Oh, I should have just mentioned what step I'm on here. So I just started it, but what I'm doing here is applying what's called the Imprimatura, which is this warm yellow stain. And you saw that I put a little bit of water into the paint. So that water is just going to make it a little bit thinner. It's going to spread just a little bit faster, more quickly, and then dry just a little bit faster. Also, because it's a stain rather than a paint, it's going to get absorbed by the gesso, the white paint that is on this. Like the canvas comes what they call pre-gessoed, so it already has some gesso on it, and that gesso is basically like a plaster coating, right? So the white is, or the water helps this the pigment kind of embed itself into this surface. Okay. I'm not surprised. Bilali says, I love the space between the stars screenplay idea. Tony says, I would say it should be about the history of the U.S. It didn't make it into the official history books. Great. There's a great book called, by, I think it's Howard Zinn, is it The People's History of the United States? I read it like 20 years ago or so, when I was in college. Great book, and that's sort of like what you're talking about. Like there's There's the official version of American history, and we could really say the official version of any country's history. And that's something we're dealing with a lot in Canada these days, is that the official version of Canadian history is definitely highlights some things and then conveniently forgets a lot of other things, entire histories of other cultures. Which, I don't know why is that so controversial, but... Okay. So, let's blow dry this. And then, I should also, maybe actually just before I go on here. Yeah, I just wanted to make mention of just some of these pigments and things that I'm using here. So, what I just applied is my warm yellow, or Azo Yellow Deep. And this is the palette that I use. These are the paints I use. I'm not sponsored or paid by anybody. If you want to use Amsterdam paint, I think you get a pretty good bang for your buck. Golden paint is about 3 times the price and about twice as good in terms of quality. Liquitex, they make the student grade, as well as a much higher quality brand. Winsor & Newton, Artist Loft from Michael's Art Supply Chain, Buzz, Holbein, Peebo, and Daler-Rowney. So lots of different options for you to do exactly what we're doing here. The one thing that I'm using that is not mentioned on here is what we call this heavy matte gel. So I'm going to be using that shortly here. Of course, there is just heavy matte gel. There's heavy gloss gel. There's I think there's soft gel as well. And those things, this basically, the meaning of this is if I paint something with this material, it's going to stay texture-wise exactly the way it is, maybe 95% of the way it is once it dries. Because most of what happens when you paint with acrylic paint is as the water evaporates, the paint kind of self-levels a little bit. It loses some of the peaks of the texture. So if you have these sort of like, you want to have a little spiky texture, often that will sort of kind of lower as the paint loses some of its body as the water evaporates. So this material is intended to keep that texture. Okay, so let's man, there is a lot of comments in there. I'm gonna move on and just talk kind of quickly about the biography. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about who Jasper Johns was, his significance in art history. We'll take a look at some of his artwork and of this particular painting itself. Again, as always, consider joining the Facebook group, uploading your version of today's painting, if that's what you're working on today, or anything else, because in a few weeks we'll do our feedback episode, and we can celebrate your achievement, and I can help you make it look even better than it already is. So, yeah, let's start with Jasper Johns. So Jasper Johns, born in 1930, still alive, going strong today, age 92, right? So he's, probably considered to be the last great artist from the 20th century. Like the one of the towering giants that was alive throughout, a couple of major phases of art, particularly American art, and that is abstract expressionism, that, is most closely identified with people like Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, Franz Klein, Robert Motherwell, J. DeFeo, Helen Frankenthaler, Elaine de Kooning, Lee Krasner, who was Jackson Pollock's wife, who's an amazing painter. So those abstract expressionist painters were all about sort of the way it sounds. They're painting abstract paintings in a expressionist manner, right? There's We see splatters of paint. Like, generally the way it's painted is very gestural, and they're usually large paintings with a lot of paint, and we can almost imagine the artist's body moving across the canvas, just like Jackson Pollock with his can of paint with a stick dipping into it, splattering paint, and you really feel the gesture. You sense the expression, right? It's you can't ignore it. We talked about Mark Rothko a few weeks ago. Mark Rothko is usually very much identified as part of that group, even though he didn't really consider his work to be expressionist at all, right? Very, these color field paintings. Anyway, I digress. So you have abstract expressionism, and Jasper Johns sort of emerges during that period, but he's sort of like the little bit of a younger generation to those abstract expressionist painters. So of course he's using some of the aspects of abstract expressionism, but he has his sort of own way of going about things, and his kind of style is what some people call like proto-pop. It comes sort of right before pop art, and obviously he's still alive. I'm not sure how much work he's doing these days, but so we have, let's even just sort of look at, oops, I should have just, like a painting like this by Johns, shares some of the hallmarks of abstract expressionism. It's abstract, right? We don't see any recognizable images, even though he did do some like this that have numbers and letters in them. You can see there is some text down at the bottom, but for the most part it's just color and texture. And the way that the paint is applied, it doesn't appear that it's like precisely applied. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you get the sense that there's kind of a speedy way of painting, rather than like Pierre Mondrian, who did like the grids, or the Mona Lisa or something, where it's just very precisely painted. There's a little bit more of a gestural quality to this type of work. So there's that, and then of course he starts incorporating these other images, like the flag in particular, right? He starts gluing things into the paint, and that is what we start seeing more and more as pop art starts to take off. So here's another famous series of artworks by Jasper Johns, is these numbers. So all of the numbers sort of laid up on top of one another, right? So you could probably see the number 4 here. There's number 3. They're all there, just sort of the big number 1 right down the middle. So all these numbers that are there, but because they're all colliding and sandwiched on top of one another, it becomes kind of abstract, and you're like, I guess I see numbers in there, but it's pretty hard to really recognize anything. So it becomes, and it goes from some sort of representational painting to something abstract. And I think he's also maybe playing on the fact that numbers themselves are kind of an abstraction from reality. It's not like you can go into the forest and pick some numbers off of a tree, right? Numbers don't innately exist in nature, although I'm sure I could have a spirited argument with a mathematician who would talk about how numbers are abstract but represent, very cohesive ideas, potentially. I don't know. I haven't thought about it too much, but I think one of the things with Johns here is the way that he takes something that is so recognizable and kind of makes it abstract. And I think that's what happens a little bit with these flags, is he's taking something that is ubiquitous, right? That is everywhere. Like the American flag, we see, even here in Canada, you see American flags on hotels and in certain restaurants and airports and that kind of thing. So, but in the United States, people have flags on their cars driving around, just like it was just Canada Day today. We see a lot of Canadian flags. So this kind of symbol that is everywhere, And then sort of by, I kind of feel like as he's painting it, it starts, he's sort of transforming it back into something that's abstract. And I think there's an interesting, we could sort of talk about what that means. It's sort of like he's stripping away the context for the flag and trying to see like what is it about the American flag, or any flag for that instance, and that has meaning, and at what point does it stop having the meaning that it normally has and takes on a different meaning? And can that happen at all, or is the Stars and Stripes such an iconic image that it will always sort of come through? Unlike these numbers where they kind of start to disappear a little bit, right? I think... Oh, this, I should also just say a number of other things that he started to... He was really good friends with another artist called Robert Rauschenberg, whom I met and received an award from, called the Power of Art Award, many years ago for art teaching. The highest honor for an art teacher in the United States is the Robert Rauschenberg Award. And anyway, one of the things that Rauschenberg did a lot of is what he called combines. So like sculpture and painting colliding together into one. And so this is kind of a little bit like that, like this sculpture of these paintbrushes just jammed into a coffee can here, and then calling that an artwork. And some people are like, are you kidding me? I've got a lot of these things sitting around the house that have kind of gelled all up, and all the paint is kind of frozen all these brushes together. And does that mean I've got a bunch of artworks around the house? Potentially. I think, you know, it's interesting that Johns would transform brushes and a brush can into an artwork. And it's, again, it's sort of like when we go back to that idea of expressionism and the sensing of the artist's movement around the canvas, there's something also about this where we sense like the absence or the presence of the artist who would have used these brushes, but in a different way than paint on the canvas. Here we have the literal tools that the artist used to make their artwork. Let me see, anything else? What do I want to say more about Jasper Johns that we haven't talked about before? Oh, another thing that Jasper Johns did do a lot of is, in fact, this painting that we're working on today was probably done with a method called encaustic. And encaustic is I was even thinking about doing it for today, but I thought it's such a totally different material and method than we've used before that it's sort of opening up Pandora's box. But encaustic is painting with hot wax. And so you can, some art supply stores, it's not particularly common, but I remember years ago that this was, I'm sure there's a few art supply stores in every major city that would have some encaustic supplies. But essentially it's like colored wax or just clear wax that you can put color, pigment in, or even paint into, and then you heat it up on, let's say, a small like tabletop stove in a pot, and you heat that wax up, and then you can paint with it. And Johns is really, I don't think he was the first person to use this technique, but he's absolutely 100% the person that really popularized it. And I would say there's probably not a lot of people that use this technique because it is difficult. It's potentially a little bit dangerous because you've got hot wax and a hot plate in your studio, and you might have other things like turpentine rags around, and those can ignite and start a big fire or burn your building down. So even this type of material I remember when I was in art school, we weren't allowed to use acoustic in our studios. There was like one area where you could do it if you wanted to, and it was really ventilated and fireproof and all that kind of stuff. So it is an unusual, less frequently used material. But if you're interested in it, Jasper Johns would be the person to look at. Anyway, the reason I'm showing this too is he would glue things to it. So if you remember how we did the painting we did last year based on the flag, I actually was collaging newspaper and gluing that on and then painting over top of the newspaper, and not using encaustic to stick the paper down, but just to kind of get a little bit of that effect. The cool thing with encaustic is that it has like a certain amount of transparency, and you can build up quite a lot of texture because wax dries relatively quickly. It also, that's one of the frustrating things, is it dries relatively quickly. What else do I want to just mention before we move on? Okay, so I just as you may know, one of the things that I'm doing over the course of the next 6 or 7 months is slowly working my way through the list of most expensive paintings. And if we scroll back down here, you'll recognize, oh look, here's some paintings we've already done, right? I think we started with Roy Lichtenstein, and then we didn't do the Rubens, even though this one is the most expensive painting in a Canadian collection at the Art Gallery of Ontario, but it's a pretty complex painting. But we've done these Cézanne, the Monet, Van Gogh, Basquiat, Warhol, Newman. We didn't do this painting because I thought it was a little bit, I don't know, little painting of a nude girl. It seems a little creepy to me. Elvis by Warhol. We've done these guys, and this is what we're doing tomorrow, the portrait of Joseph Roulin, the Postman, by Vincent van Gogh. So that gives you an idea of where we're at on that schedule. But here we are, the flag by Jasper Johns. So it was sold for $110 million in 2010 to Stephen A. Cohen, who was like a real estate billionaire, but now adjusted for inflation to be $136 million for today's painting that was painted in 1958. It's also worth just noting that that sale of the painting firmly puts Jasper Johns at the top of the list of most expensive artworks sold by a living artist. And you can see Jasper Johns has been on this list a few times. Earlier in 2006, another one of his artworks also achieved this ridiculous $80 million or $108 million of today's money. That's, for a painting to sell for essentially almost $140 million for a living artist is remarkable. Anything else? Oh, I should just also mention that today's flag has 48 stars. And anyone, well, maybe not that many people are entirely familiar with how many states there are in the United States. So there's 50 states in the United States. So why would Jasper Johns have made a painting that only has 48 stars? Well, it's because this painting was painted in 1958. And at that time, there were only 48 stars. The year later, Alaska and Hawaii joined the Union, bringing it up to an even 50. And who knows, maybe in a few years, Puerto Rico could join, or the U.S. Virgin Islands, or any of these other territories as a part of the United States that don't have any representation, political representation in Washington, right? That would be pretty frustrating. Okay, so how about, I just want to take a look here. Lots of comments. Oh, look at all these people. We've got Bear, Bait, Paula, Tanya, Miri. Says, I see Italian, Canadian, American, Ukrainian flags. Where are you? It's time, visitor. I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, Miri. Live in the mid-Atlantic region. We've driven through BC many times when we lived in... is that Alaska or Arkansas? It must be Alaska if you're driving. Arkansas is a little bit further away from BC here. There's Lolly. Tanya says, I think number 3 is going to work best for the stencil. Which one was number 3? That one. That's the one that Tanya says is going to work best. Lolly's got a nephew whose birthday's today. Lolly says A or C. So the tape, which is A, or C. Bearbay says, I want to go on record saying I appreciate you silencing the blow drying and introducing subtle musical tones. And also showing options to be able to reduce unnecessary experiments in the studio. Scientific method, which I truly appreciate. I do experiments with golden techs. Valuable resource and generous folks. It's great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm always interested in myself knowing what's the best option, and you never really know until you do it. You can sit around and think about it, and then when you actually do it, you learn all sorts of crazy stuff, right? What else here? Logs, you could tape the ripped part. You could use a styrofoam plate. Yeah, that's interesting. A styrofoam plate would work very similar to this, I suspect. That's interesting. Tony says, I was just thinking that with the thicker board, it's not going to allow the paint to come through as well. Tony says, the seeing X-Acto knives and fine work on cardboard makes me nervous. Paul says, I've already done the outline, so no cutting needed. Sandra says, hi, Michael. I hope you had a great vacation. I'm happy to see you back. Hi, everyone. Okay. So, awesome. Lots of cool comments in there. Great to see everyone being so active as well. Okay. So, let's move on here. Now, typically what I would do is work on our underpainting and start doing a little bit of details that I might be worried would get covered up with subsequent layers. With today's painting, I don't think that's necessary. So I'm going to go on to this step here, my background pass number 1. Now, again, we're not really working in the traditional figure-ground relationship where we have a background and then a foreground, or a figure in front of a background. That's the figure-ground relationship, right? But I'm just going to keep this up here as just a chapter stamp here, so that if you're jumping forward, you'll be able to find where we're at. So this background pass, we will do, let's work in reverse order. Let's just start with my F here. Okay. So I think this is reasonably dry. Yep, that's good. Okay. So if we were to align that, let's get some of this gel out. And I'm just wondering if you're going to be able to see what I'm doing here. So you know what? I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to paint this blue so that you might be able to see the and I'm going to mix some white in here. I think that's what I'll do, so, just so that it shows up on camera. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this cool blue and just quickly... Ooh, well, that's... gonna... Okay, it's gonna make it harder for me to see. Well, I can wipe some of this away. When it's on in its full thickness, it's a little bit hard to see what's under here. So this is my cool blue, and let's just try to... In fact, I think I can put this back in here. Yeah, I just want to be able to do this so that when I peel the stencils off, we're going to be able to more clearly see what is working and not working. Okay, I'm going to blow dry this just for you, bear bait, so you can hear the soothing sounds of music. I could make this look a little bit tidier now and then just do these stencils of the stars and be done with it. But my expectation is that this is not, none of these are going to turn out perfectly well. So it's possible that I'm going to get some of this is going to squeeze out all over the place, and I'm going to have to do some painting around these stars anyway. So that's what I'm thinking is going to happen. So that's why I'm not really going out of my way to make sure that that is let's see. So I'm putting some of this heavy matte gel. That might be enough for right now. So put this heavy matte gel here. I just want to, so that you can see what it is I'm using. And then this is my white paint. And so I'm just going to mix this white into the paint to help it show up on this blue, because heavy matte gel is clear. It'll look white at first, but this is just going to help it kind of stand out and make this whole process kind of a little bit more obvious. Ooh, that is like... So that is pretty darn thick. So that, again, that makes me anxious for some of these corners, how well this is going to hold up in here. There's a lot of paint on this brush, so I'm going to wipe that off. Okay. So we were going to start with this here. Now, am I going to be able to find one of those stars? I almost feel like I need a get my flashlight out here. Let's just... You know what? Let's see if that helps me. Sorry, my big head in the way there. Okay. So it took me a couple seconds to align this. Now once it's aligned, I want to try to keep my hand on here so that I'm not shifting anything here. Okay. So I got a lot of this paint that's on the brush as well, so this is going to be interesting. We'll see how well this works. As I said, this is the one I think is probably going to work the least well. So let's start pushing paint in. Now again, I'm expecting paint to maybe go underneath the cardboard. The one benefit that this has is because this is fairly rigid, if I'm holding it down pretty solidly, then I should be able to prevent the paint from squeezing too far underneath unless the bristles push under. So I think, you know, if this was a much larger sized canvas and I had a bigger stencil and I didn't have so many little details like these little corners, I think this would work really well. But for this specific purpose, I will be surprised if this works as I hope it does. Hope it should, but I don't know. I'm not. So I just want to kind of go in here and see if I can force all those little corners of the stars in. So it's sort of like filling holes with plaster. Okay, I think that's probably about as good as it's going to get. So let's just try to build up that final layer, and then we're going to have to try to pull it straight up into the air. So we don't, it's because we want to keep, we don't want to wreck the tips, right? Okay. Huh. Actually not bad at all. You know, I'm actually very surprised how that turned out. I love how thick the texture is. I love how kind of, maybe I'll just put this down here, just so you can see. Right, they are really coming off the canvas in a way that I really, really like. So that turned out great. Now, let's just, well, I was going to do some fine-tuning, but I suspect that, it might be easier just to do all the fine-tuning at the end, because I don't know how well I think there's gonna be a lot of fine-tuning, so I might as well just do all the fine-tuning. So that's cool. So I do think actually now I'm always happy to be pleasantly surprised to be proven wrong, because this I think if I had done this for the entire thing, I think it would have actually worked out really well. So hey, that so far we've only done one, so this is in the lead. But now the problem is this is nice thick texture, and if I just put this over top, it's gonna smush that all out and I'm gonna lose that. So this is where I was like, oh, I didn't think this entirely through, did I? So I'm gonna blow dry this, and I'm gonna have to trim my these down so that I can somehow fit these as close to the edges as possible. So let's blow dry this and think. Okay, so by no means is that done drying. With a little bit of blow dryer, that's going to take all night because I might be able to blow dry it so that the paint doesn't come off onto my finger. But if I was to push down on that, it would just squeeze like a zit, and stuff would squeeze right out of it. So that we'll just have to kind of work around. But that's again, that's going to make all these subsequent areas a little bit tricky. What is the best way to do this? I think I'm going to go right to the next piece of cardboard here. And so what I want to do is try to cut as close to the tops of these as possible without them all falling apart. In fact, you know what? Probably the smart thing to do would be just to tape this down. Okay, I think I can get pretty close to that top row there. Let's just see how close I am indeed. That's tricky. Let's take a small brush. Like you can see, this is the exact opposite of a very fluid brush. Like this paint is, it's like a, I don't even know what kind of texture it is. It's like a, you know, a gum that you've been chewing on all day and it's turning into rubber. That's kind of like what this texture's like. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So let's try the next row of stars. And I think potentially this could end up being really good. I mean, considering how well the previous one turned out with the thicker cardboard, this gives me a lot of hope for how this one could turn out. Oops, that's okay. It's come apart there a little bit at the bottom, which is probably going to mean it might, the paint might squeeze underneath those edges a little bit. Okay, so I got the paint all in place, and I'm just going to kind of tap in here, trying to hope that I can get as much into these stars. See that? Like I could even see, just as I was doing that, that there was paint that wasn't, it had looked like it had been covered, but once I started dabbing, it pulled some of the paint up off the canvas, and I realized it hadn't actually gone all the way down to the surface there. It was sort of just hovering above. Maybe I should just show you kind of. Actually, I can't move that over, but okay. So now I've kind of, I think I've now covered. I think I'm hoping that I've painted that surface all the way down. So now let's just build up the layer here to get a heavier. See if we can get more texture now that we've technically painted the stars. Okay. Are we ready? Once more, let's pull this up and off. Ooh. That turned out really good as well. Okay. That is very surprising. All right, we've got a lot of texture there. I think I got, well, I think it actually, it's, what's the difference between these two? Very little. I would say this layer, as expected, because it was thinner, I was able to get into the corners a little bit more. So the centers of all of these, or both rows, are basically the same. I see a bit of a difference where it's thicker at the corner of the stars. So that's very interesting to see. That doesn't surprise me at all. I was sort of expecting that. Oops. It's hot in here. Okay, let's wait for that. Camera just overheated a little bit, so I'll let that slowly come back to life. Okay. Come on. So I'm going to blow dry this anyway, and then we'll see what the next one has in. Okay, so 2 successful versions here. Let's go to this one here. This is the one I thought might be a bit of our whatchamacallit, odd one out, the foam. So I'm gonna just put some tape up here again. So let's, just to help keep this from falling apart, a little bit of stability there. And then we'll cut as close to the tops as possible. I still need to get a little bit closer. And with this particular one, that makes me a little bit worried, because being a little bit more flexible like that, like the benefit of this one is that it's pretty rigid. I can just kind of push it down in one area and I'm pretty confident it's going to work. But here, I don't know. This is either going to work well. I don't think it's going to work that well, to be honest. Let's just put it right out there. And while this paint is drying fast, that brush is almost clogged up entirely. Okay, I am going to move this one up a bit here to... So the one benefit of this one is it's because it's flexible, I can kind of bend it like that. But it's also, can be its downside, is it's kind of, you know, it's got a lot of flexibility. So it's possible that this works really well. You know, even just when I lift it up, you see how, you probably can't really see that, but anyway, let's just do it, see how it turns out. This paint is pretty sticky now. it definitely, having cut that top part off, it loses a lot of its structure, and I think this is this could be the worst one, just as I see it developing here. I think it under different circumstances I could see this working really well, but right now I don't know. Like, I think, like, oh, you can't quite see here. The one on the right, I think this one worked really well because it's got a little bit more weight there holding down that far edge. Anyway, let's see what we get. I sort of have a feeling that when I peel this template off, a lot of the texture is going to come with the template. That's my feeling at the moment, as opposed to sticking onto the canvas. So, you ready? Let's see. Well, not bad. Actually, way better than I thought it would be. Huh. Okay, so again, surprised. I mean, if anything, I was able to get even more thickness. Surprisingly. I mean, it is possible. I will say that this material is getting thicker as you know, it's only been on the palette here for about, like, what, 15 minutes, and it is already pretty chunky, and I can sense it sort of drying and hardening up, so much so that I want to wash these brushes because I'm a little bit afraid of them solidifying on me. So I'm just going to clean these off before the paint dries inside. So that's cool. I mean, that is a lot of texture. It does make me wonder, if I had let this paint dry for a little bit longer, would I still get, would these previous ones have turned out? I mean, that's a lot of, it's almost to the point where there's too much texture. It's almost too much. I did not think, as I said, when I was peeling this off, what I was expecting was going to happen is basically that top layer, like, this would just look solid. I wouldn't actually see through here at all. It would just be one blob. That's very surprising. Okay, well, that's good. I love surprises. I love surprises. Lolly says I love a good challenge. Okay, so I'm gonna need to mix up more of my medium because I've got these three here. There is still some of my heavy matte gel in here, but I think at this point it's just too thick to use. So let's scoop some more out and do this again. Let's start with that, because the final one with the tape, that's going to take me a few minutes to prep all of that. So this will be for the next 2 layers, I think. You know, a jar like this is probably 20 bucks or so, which sounds like a lot, maybe, but I've probably had that jar for 4 years or something, right? It's not like I mean, just in the way, I don't usually paint a lot with it, so it's not, you know, if I use it once every couple of years, then I'm getting a good value for it. Take some of my white paint. And let's give this a good stir. Okay, maybe I should have gotten my stencil prepped here before I did that. What do we want to do? I guess we're sort of working our way down to thinner and thinner, so let's continue that that evolutionary trajectory. So let's tape that down again. And okay. I think this is going to work really well. This is now, after having seen how everything's developed, my suspicion is that this is going to be the most effective one. It's also, because it's a little bit thinner, it seems easier for me to line it up. I think that's lined up. Okay. Let's get a brush here. Let's see if I can get some of this out of this brush. Emerson says there's something very oddly satisfying about painting. I agree. Absolutely. It's possible that because of the thickness of this paint, that's why I'm not seeing as much leakage underneath the stencil as I was expecting, because the paint is just thicker, so it's just has a harder time sneaking in underneath the stencil. I think if I had not put the heavy matte gel in here, then my results would be probably a little bit different. I might have a little bit more issues with paint underneath the stencil. So I think I've got the paint into all the corners. Let's just Now try to smush paint. Okay, so if I actually smooth the top off, I think it would be quite shallow, so I've deliberately tried to pile a little bit of extra paint on top there. Ooh, okay. So that's surprising. This was the one I thought was going to be the best. And look how much paint came out underneath. I have quite a lot of paint left over on here. I don't know. Is it possible that because it was still wet, I just must not have been pressing down on there? So that's very strange. So thought that would be my most effective one. Turned out not to be. Which one was this? This is B. Okay. So I was expecting all of these rows were going to turn out like this one, and that I was going to spend most of today's episode doing painting around these stars like I'll have to do here. But look, the first 3 rows I didn't have to do any of that. Maybe a little bit there, but I mean, yeah, it's always surprising how things turn out. So let's try this one. Lindsay says, "Hi from Kentucky. I'm so glad you're covering this artist. I love his work. Looking great. Happy Independence Day, Lindsay. What are you up to today? Having a little barbecue? Watching some... I guess it's, football hasn't started yet. It's Thanksgiving, right? Baseball, I guess? There must be some big baseball games today. I'm gonna cut that even more narrow. Ah! Too narrow. I think trimming it like this also really affects the structural integrity of the stencil. So that's also going to affect, so just right now, I guarantee you, right around here, we're going to have something like that situation happening. Okay, let's do this. So here, this has the benefit of I can see very clearly where the paint has gone, if it's gone onto the stencil, if I've got all the way up to the corners. So that's really great because it can help me get really nice and precise. The disadvantage is, of course, because it is so thin, that it's less it's more likely to kind of bend and warp, and for there to be paint that could sneak underneath here. So what I've done is I just sort of pushed that down. Looks like it's kind of holding it. I'm kind of hoping maybe some of the paint, as it goes potentially underneath the stencil, actually kind of glues it down a little bit temporarily. Okay, so right now this is very flat. There's very little texture, so I'm gonna have build up a lot of texture on top. It just occurred to me that there's probably like a cake decorating star that I could be squeezing out of like a pouch that would help this whole process, and I could be done in seconds. So that maybe that's for next year's Independence Day. I'll just be doing Jasper Johns flags for the next decade, trying to figure out the best way to do this, or different alternative ways. So, hard to tell how high this should go. And it's possible that putting too much on this could have an adverse effect as well, right? You really just don't know. Hey, there's Lindsay. Thanks so much for the donation through the super chat. That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, are we ready? You can see kind of how thick this is. Gotta kind of pull it up. Ooh. Okay, that might be the best one so far. And here I thought it wasn't going to work very well at all. So, I mean, again, lots of really nice texture there. That's cool. I really like how this is turning out. Now, there's going to be some paint to paint around some of these stars. That's going to take some time. Okay. So. Trying to think of Just laying them all out there so we can look at them together at the end. And the last one is going to be with tape down here on the bottom. So, let's just get as close up to the bottom of those stars as possible. And this will be interesting because I've done and demoed how to do this tape many times, but it is a little bit different when we're using this textured material to paint with. Just want to make sure that would work. What am I trying to do here? Let's as I'm always asking myself, what is it you're actually trying to do, Michael? Let's start there. I think that needs to be higher, doesn't it? It needs to be... So technically... maybe it was in the right place to begin with. Okay, let's do this quickly. I always like kind of doing things in a bit of an assembly line process. It keeps me focused as to where I'm at. Have I done that? As I say that, then I lose track of what I've done. Haven't done. These lines. And this is going to be a bit of a pain in the butt getting all these little triangles off the canvas, but it is what it is, and just takes some patience. I think I just smudged that with my finger. Oops, and I just, here I've cut too hard and gone right down through the canvas. So there's the board underneath there exposed. I suspect that won't be the only time that happens. Oh. In this particular instance, I don't mind if that comes up a little bit. I keep getting my big meaty fingers in the pie here and smudging the stars. So this one row that was my best row so far, if it wasn't for me, it would still be the best row so far. See, what I'm expecting, the reason why I think this may not work as well for this particular thing is I might be able to get, I could get perfectly sharp stars with the tape if I'm doing a thin layer of paint, but when I start doing these big thick layers, when I try to peel the tape off, it's gonna be really hard just to get around the peaks. And I'm thinking what's gonna happen is sort of like what just happened there with my fingers, is I'm going to be kind of smudging the paint away. Unless I try to wait overnight and then I peel it later on. Even then, because of how thick this material is, it's possible that the paint would just stick to the tape, and then I'd have to kind of cut it away. I did it again. I should have blow dried this. Oh well, I told you I was going to have to do a little bit of touch-ups. This is why if we're ever trapped in some sort of situation and one of us has to diffuse a bomb, this is why you do not want me to diffuse the bomb. You'd be like, I saw your live stream where you did the Jasper Johns flag and you kept getting your fingers in the wet paint. Like, no, you're not someone who should be touching the bomb. Let somebody else do it. Like, you hold the flashlight, Michael. That's what we need you to do. That's all you need to do. Just stay over there, hold the flashlight, and okay. Paul said, "Is it a holiday in the United States today?" Yes, yes. July 4th it's one of the biggest holidays of the year in the United States. American independence from the United Kingdom from England. Okay. So normally what I do here is apply some matte medium and then blow dry. Do I need to do that? Do I want to do that? Yeah, let's do that. I don't want to have any excuses saying, well, it didn't turn out because I didn't put the matte medium on there. If I put the matte medium, I'm sure it would have turned out much better. So, in fact, how about let's put matte medium on just half of this. We'll do... which set? I have a feeling these ones are going to turn out better than this. I think this is going to be a bit of a disaster here. When I peel the tape off, I'm worried that I'm going to peel the canvas and it's going to tear. Anyway, if I was to do this again, I think we have some other options which I think have certainly gone faster than what I've just done here so far. So that's the purpose, is just to kind of figure out what worked and what didn't. Putting this matte medium, so matte medium is just paint that has no pigment in it, right? So it's just clear paint, and that is going to seal those edges. So when I paint, there's less likely that paint is going to go underneath. And oops. Sorry, just a text from the nanny there, just making sure everything's all right. Okay, I'm going to mute the microphone. Okay, so just trying to think to myself the best way to do this when I want to peel this paint or the tape off. Do I want it to be in one continuous piece? We might have to peel it up and over. I think the tape is going to start falling apart on its own. I don't think basically, just sorry, what I was in my mind thinking about doing is, should I cut little areas here so that when I'm peeling at the paint, that I can just sort of peel maybe one star off at a time? That actually maybe that makes more sense. What if I just cut? Yeah. Okay, let's actually... Just folding that over, it's going to make it easier for me to peel this off when I'm ready. So we'll see. Was that a smart strategy or not? Okay, so now I'm going to use my matte medium, or my heavy matte gel, again, with white paint mixed into it. And now I can, with this kind of thing, I can be pretty secure that I'm not really going to get paint going underneath the tape, because you know, I've this, first of all, this material is so thick that the likelihood that it's going to bleed under here, I think, is very, very low. Especially these four that I did when I put the matte medium down. I think that's going to really help prevent that paint from sneaking under. So really the question is, how much paint should I put down here? Because it's possible that when I peel the tape off, some of, if that's really high peaks, I'm going to distort those areas. But let's just heap it on. This is the last set of stars anyway, so I might as well use up this paint. Get it as thick as possible. Okay. The moment of truth, our last set of stars. And then I think I'm going to do the stripes with some texture too. It doesn't make sense for just the stars to have texture, right? The stripes are equally as important. All right. Does anybody... Here's your citizenship question. What is the significance of the stars? We talked about the stars being this current number of states. What is the significance of the stripes? If you're American, you should probably know that, but curious, does anybody know how many stripes there are? And what is the significance of those stripes? Tanya's nervous now. Okay, well, I'm just gonna tease this out even more, get my tea ready here. Looks like this one's done. Okay, what do you think? Let's go down here. Zoom right in. Let's get... Okay. I don't know if you see, but the canvas itself peeled up a lot. It's kind of cool. It's definitely super sharp star, but I also got some of the canvas came up. Ah, and the tape is now torn. Oh no. Ooh, that's probably gonna happen over and over. Ha ha. Okay, maybe let's go from this side and go the other way. Okay, so I got a perfect star. I wonder if... So maybe having cut these into individual pieces, not the best strategy, as it turns out. Okay, so these, they look great on one side, but now I've got to do the hard work of getting the other side. off. So a pair of tweezers would help here, obviously. Bottom right corner one is still still on there. That one didn't turn out. So I got pretty good results here. Surprising, actually, how those turned out. Tony says, like the game of Operation, where you're trying to get the funny bone out without the buzzer going off. Okay, so I'm gonna blow dry this just to help keep the outer skin as dry as possible. The inside's gonna take a couple days to dry inside, but that'll just prevent me from my big fingers from smushing or smudging stuff around. So I'm gonna mute the mic. Okay, so I want to move on to the stripes, and then I'm gonna come back and work on the kind of paint around some of this, but just give it just as much time as possible for the stars to dry before I start noodling in and around there. The more time, the better. So now when we do the stripes, I think I want to do some texture on the stripes as well. Maybe this time I'll do the red stripes as with texture. Just debating. What is... Okay, so let's just think about what we've learned here. Because I could use tape, but maybe it's worth looking at the ones that worked here and just seeing maybe I could just use one of these templates to help with this. Right? So, if we think about what was working here, which one... I guess let's put our tape at the bottom. I see, that was A, and this is the one I thought would be number 1. So in actuality, which ones did work? Which one was best, would we say? I think our new ranking, I don't know, you can tell me what you think. I think this one achieved first place. Surprisingly, this one worked the best. I mean, I think this is pretty close. The tape works really well. B... Now it's hard to say which one... Because this is this C here. That's A. B, surprisingly, I gotta say, this one, which I expected to be one of the best, I think that's coming in 6th. This one, maybe 5th. And then 4th and 3rd. So I do think, I find it so hard to believe this. Why did that one not? The one that I thought might have been the best one was one of the worst ones. You could see my expectations, how kind of, what was that, number 6? And so, you know, yeah, so I was close in many ways, but there was a few big surprises here. So having bared all that in mind, borne all that in mind, could I just use something like this to create these strips? Well, first of all, let's get some white on here. Whoa. In fact, I don't need all of that. And here, let's just put a bit back. You only want to do this if your paintbrush is clean, obviously, right? You want to start scooping paint back into a jar or tube. Yeah, a bunch of people say that the C3 one worked best, so that's so surprising. That's the benefit of doing it and seeing for yourself, you know, how it works, because you just never know. Right? I had some obviously very clear ideas, but when I actually started doing it, it turned out differently. So I'm just going to paint this white with a bit of the matte medium in here. Should I put texture in here? I don't think so. I'm just going to keep this a little bit transparent, I think. Okay. What's also satisfying, just as I'm doing this, is this jar of paint, all these little ones, these are the paint that I've rescued from tubes of paint that otherwise were empty, that I couldn't squeeze any paint out of, but I cut them open and just scooped the extra paint out, and I've made an entire painting so far with leftover paint. I could probably do 5 more of these, right? So just a good idea is to scoop that paint out. Tony says F was good. That was just the corrugated cardboard. Surprise, surprise. I would not have expected that to work. I'm going to blow dry this because next I'm going to mix my red, and then I'm going to put the red thick stripes over top of this. So let's blow dry it. Okay, so should we continue this experiment of stripes? Let's just continue doing stripes. So corrugated, I need a little bit more corrugated cardboard. This is, I guess, double corrugated cardboard. Is that fair? Should I use single ply cardboard? Okay. I guess I just need some straight lines. I wonder if I'm doing the stripes, should I be going against the grain? That could have an effect. You know what? I think I'm overthinking things. I think things are going to turn out pretty well no matter what I use. And I'm just going to... Let's just go with this. This is... wonder, can I get... this flag... do something like that, trace it out, cut it out. You know, so you could actually make a pretty cool stencil like this, and we could have done it maybe all in one shape, potentially. One giant stencil. Let me just... Okay, let me just refer... Actually, you know what I wanted to do is to... Okay, so now that we've got the stars in place, we're going to paint around the stars soon enough, but let's work on the stripes. So I've got this kind of template that I'm starting to create here. I just want to remember where the red is, right? So this one, well, let's just put red, 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 red. white, white, white. Okay, so we want paint, red paint to go down, and white paint to, so we're gonna cut the strips out where it's red, right? That's the plan, Michael? Yes. Oh, and how big does this really need to be? So if we've got this cut out, come on, there we go. Oh, it goes almost right to the edge. Huh. I was hoping there would be a little bit left over. Interesting. Okay. That's gonna flop around. I can build a little structure on the other side here once I've got this more established. Of course I could just paint this, obviously, right? But since I'm going to all the trouble of doing these stencils and things, it's like, well, maybe we just keep on going. So this makes me think, you know, maybe this should have been done earlier in a different previous stage. Lindsay says, painting is just a series of problem solving, isn't it? Yes. Great point. Yeah, painting is often, you know, it's like you create a problem for yourself and then you've got to solve it. And I can totally see why some people are like, why on earth would I want to give myself all that grief? It's just like, that's ridiculous. It doesn't. I want my life to be as easy as possible. But I think we all know that the most satisfying things in life are things that are achieved after, you know, nothing worth doing is easy. Right? The most satisfying things happen when you put in a little bit of effort and you feel like you've solved something and you're growing. Okay. That drives me a bit nutty. Actually, okay, this funny looking template. It's hard for me to see where these pencil lines are. Okay, that's pretty good. So I'll probably have to do a little fiddling, but essentially now I'm pretty confident I can just smush the paint into these places, and we'll I'll have it good. Now I have the opportunity actually to adjust these where I didn't make the lines quite straight. So the rest look great. Okay, so let's actually let's look at the colors first now, because we're gonna mix this flag. I'm pretty sure that's just like our warm red right out of the tube. And since we're painting on top of this white, I don't think I need to put any additional color in there to make it stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to use this red. And I'm going to mix my matte, or sorry, my heavy matte gel. Might as well just go nuts for using it. Let's keep on going here. And again, this is clear, right? So I don't have to worry about dipping. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to ever dip a brush with color into here. So I'm putting a significant amount of that red into this mixture here. Let's zoom back down. Because one thing, this is clear, and if I don't put enough paint into this mixture, then what will happen is that this color, rather than being a really nice, bright, intense red like this, will have like it'll be oddly, like, it won't have the intensity of color. It'll be slightly ghosted, because there's going to be some of that transparent paint that hasn't been well mixed in here, and so then I might have to go back over top of this red and paint red over top of the red if it didn't work out. So I think that's pretty good, though. Pretty thick, nice mixture. Again, I really want to make sure that I've mixed it in pretty well, so we don't have any areas, you know, like you're making muffins and you got all the chocolate chips in one muffin, and the rest only have one or two little chips, right? So, in fact, just before, I am going to put a little bit of tape here, just to keep things from sliding around too much. Make a little tab for myself. Right, so that as I go, right now that's pretty good. It shifts around a little bit, but it's not going to suddenly just jump, and then I'm going to be like, ah, no, don't, what are you doing? Painting, you've betrayed me. So got lots of this paint. As I go here, I want to just try to prevent the paint from sneaking out. I mean, obviously I can paint some white to fix those areas, but if I don't have to, that just is one less thing that I need to do. So let's just go right in here. So I just want to make sure that we get paint into in here properly, and then we can start applying any necessary texture. And you can really have fun with the way you do this. how do you, like, what kinds of, it's, you know, we can make shapes and all sorts of fun stuff. See that? Imagine, I mean, I could just easily just paint this and go along and with a paintbrush and do that, and I think it would look pretty good, but this just really helps to speed up the process, you know, rather than sort of spending time doing little finicky details. I can just have fun. The other thing too, I think what I've also noticed with these stencils is it, especially kind of right near the edges, it seems to kind of like stick down a little bit, and that I can use as to my advantage, so that when I peel off the tape, I'm not so worried that the stencil is just going to start moving all over the place. Despite starting out with all that paint, I'm already starting to kind of run out. So I'm gonna have to mix some more here. Again, remember, this is all just recycled paint that was going into the trash, otherwise, that I've managed to salvage from my paint tubes. So that it's being used at all makes me happy, and I don't have to worry about wasting paint, because there's a lot of paint in here, right? Lindsay asks, have you ever done any Rayism paintings studies? I haven't. I can add it to the list of things to do. Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, that's one of the things. There's sometimes there's a lot of information about some things and no information about other things. And part of what I've been trying to do is to shed light on some of the lesser known artists and styles and movements. So I will add that in here. Oh, sorry, all the way zoomed out. Let's So this is going to take, obviously, some time for all of this thick, goopy paint to dry. It's funny, the first word that came to mind was retire. It's going to take a long time for this paint to retire. Okay, Michael? And now I'm being really goopy. Got all this extra paint. Where do I want to put it? Okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to get the rest off with the brush as much as I'd want to. Just want to see if there's any area that is just woefully neglected. Okay, so I don't think there's any tape holding this stencil down at all anymore. So let's peel this off. Let's see here, 1 second. Where should we start? Up here? Yay! Okay, now I've got this. I wonder if I can just take extra paint off of here. Not sure why, but you know, this is maybe I want to use it for something. I got, you know, extra newspapers around before I know what I want, because I don't think I want. I mean, I'm gonna throw it out, but that'll be a wet thing to put in the garbage. Let's just put that down there. Wow, that looks super cool. How can I show this? So really, obviously, the last thing to do is the the blue in the top left corner there. That's going to require a little bit of time to complete. I'm not in a particular hurry, so I'm going to do it. I mean, ideally, what I would do is just let this dry for maybe 2 or 3 days before I finish that. I mean, maybe I love finishing these episodes because it's always nice to be able to walk away with the painting being done. But considering all the paint on here, I think this is one that I might just have to let sit for a little while and then come back to. Yeah. Got a little bit of paint smudged under there, but honestly, I think that might have been when I was peeling the template off. I think that's might be more likely as to the cause of what happened there than paint sneaking underneath while I was painting. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I think, I mean, I could be fine with it right now, but I know that a little bit of work in and around here is going to, and especially cleaning up that edge, is really going to be super satisfying. So I think what I am going to do is just let this sit for the next 24 to 48 hours and then carefully paint in here when I've got a little bit of time. No sense after spending 3 hours doing all this, rushing to get it done. So I think, yeah, that's what we'll do for today. It is a holiday, so maybe it's time to fire up the barbecue and put a couple smokies on there, a couple veggie burgers, and just call it a day. Oh, you know what? Maybe let's just do our quick side-by-side comparison for those people who are just gonna zip into this part of the video. Okay, even though the paintings aren't completely done, let's just take a quick little side-by-side comparison and just see how they turned out. And I think we can make a pretty good evaluation as to what worked and maybe what didn't work as well here. So let's just as a quick reminder to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and then hit it again so that you can see, to put it to all, so you know when all these videos that we're doing pop up. Take a photograph of your painting, upload it to the Facebook group so that we can share and celebrate in your work. And if you found today's episode helpful, consider leaving a donation via PayPal. You can use a super chat like Lindsay did earlier. You can contact me through the Facebook group or the website. My websites, all that stuff's down below. Okay, so here's the original painting. And my version side by side. Ah, I just noticed this yellow. Ah. Okay, not quite exactly. These are definitely very white stripes, right? As opposed to that kind of yellowy newspaper quality. But I don't mind. I mean, this is obviously much more like the actual American flag. So the fact that it doesn't look exactly like John's, I mean, there is the possibility that I could paint textured areas in here. That was going to be very difficult to do now. With all of this texture, to try to get nice sharp lines of a different color in between there, that would be, I mean, I could do it, but I'd probably end up having just to use a very small brush and just very carefully painting along those lines. So I don't think that's going to be happening. Maybe let's just look closer at some of these stars here. Okay, I can't go any further down, so... So his definitely did not have the same amount of texture in it either. There is texture that we see from the encaustic process, but nowhere near as much as I put down. That's just something I wanted to do. And obviously when I go back around here with some warm blue, my ultramarine blue, and just sort of clean up some of this, I think that's going to look really cool. It's going to get have a really deep dark blue, like the blue that we see there on the left, and I think that will work really well. In retrospect, you know, the white that I put down here for the stripe, if I had just put more matte medium on, remember I put matte medium back in the jar because I put too much out. If I had left that original amount, I would have had much more of a yellow stripes there. But I just wasn't obviously paying close enough attention. Also, my stars are also white, whereas his have a bit of that kind of yellowy, stained kind of quality. If we just take a look at the texture, you can see how thick and goopy everything is, right? Paint really coming off the canvas, and that is pretty satisfying. Okay, so thank you everyone for painting along with me. Some new faces in the chat, people saying it turned out great, heroic. That's awesome, and thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Independence Day, those of you that are in the United States. Those of you that aren't, well, we can still celebrate the United States. I think on the whole, you know, there's positives and negatives to every country, but you know, I'd much rather, I've spent quarter of my life, it used to be a half, and then it used to be a third, and now it's a quarter of my life living in New York and Los Angeles, and most of my greatest friends of all time still live in the United States and are American, so I have a lot of great memories from being down there. Yeah, could things be better? And has there been some disappointing news coming out of the States recently? Yes. But I have faith that that, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and anyway. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to paint a very, very famous Vincent van Gogh painting, Vincent van Gogh's painting of the Postman, and I'm looking forward to that. There's actually 2 versions of it. I'm just going to do one. I'm like, should I do 2? Those 2 paintings usually take me like 6 hours, so we'll just try to focus on 1 tomorrow, Michael. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening and your holiday if you have one. We'll talk to you guys all tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, morning, sunset, sunrise, midnight, moonrise, moonset, wherever you are. Thank you, everyone. Take care. We'll talk to you all again very soon. That was fun. That was really cool.